There's got to be an easier way. It's got to be something simpler.
Well, ask Donald Trump.
On
Fill
their
out a
outrage.
Schedule H if you sold heroin this year. All these taxes get replaced with a national sales tax of 23%, which roughly equals how much comes out of your check. Maybe I just don't think like a criminal, but I couldn't see any way to like cheat it. The rich politicians are the ones backing this, and then that might give you some indication that maybe it does benefit the rich.
If you're a legit business like Walmart or something, you're not going to not collect sales tax. That'd be suicide.
And welcome to another Kitchen Sink Microscopy. I'm Casey Rochford.
And I'm Erik Rosenblatt.
So, what is today's topic of discussion?
Well, I just did my taxes today.
That's always fun.
Well, you can see I pulled my hair out. Well, most of it, at least. And it got me.
I must have really done my taxes.
You must run a business. It got me thinking, like, what? There's got to be an easier way. It's got to be something simpler.
Well, ask Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think an easier way would be, though? Like, I mean, there's like 6 foot tall volumes of tax code that get like thrown away and reprinted every year, like with all new rules and regulations that people have to learn. So how could it possibly be simpler than that?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's about as simple as it gets, right? At least as far as the government's concerned. Yeah, that is kind of ridiculous. The complexity of the tax code. I just think, why is it so complex, and is there an alternative?
Well, I've heard of some ideas, and I don't know. There's a lot of countries that have experimented with, as far as I know, they've experimented with something like consumption tax, I believe it's called.
Yeah. Is that the same as VAT, like the VAT tax, or is that different?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not really great with accounting and all that economic stuff.
We'll have to look into that one.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've heard of a lot of different alternatives. This is a flat tax, and it's probably, I don't know, there's a dozen or so different ideas that people have running around. One that I heard of quite a while ago that sounded kind of interesting was the FairTax.
Yeah, that one is definitely interesting. It's got a lot of good points to it, in that it's and I don't know if everyone's heard of it, but
why don't you tell people what it's all about? Because I'm sure not everybody's heard of it.
Yeah, like I would implore you all to Google it and check it out in some detail, because it's literally like a book this thick, and you can read the whole premise, which is much simpler than the current tax code. But in effect, the theory behind it is to replace the income tax and Social Security and Medicare tax and capital gains and blah, blah, blah. All these taxes get replaced with a national sales tax of 23%, which roughly equals how much comes out of your check anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's only taxed on new goods and some services. A lot of services, but a few are exempt.
Okay.
And like the whole point behind it, I think, is some attempt to bring in cash from illegal stuff that gets to skirt the income tax, because who's filing their taxes for selling pot,
Yeah. Well,
um,
some states maybe, but yeah, or
well, yeah,
prostitution.
now they are, but yeah.
Prostitution or things like that. Yeah, any of the black markets that are operating, they're not paying any income tax on
Fill
their
out a
operation.
Schedule H if you sold heroin this year.
Well, someday that'll probably happen. But in the meantime, it sounds like a really intriguing idea. Um,
Well, probably the most interesting part is the idea of a prebate, where you get a monthly
yeah,
check from the government to cover the poverty level of tax that you would spend, presumably. Um, and that's a little bit like this Andrew Yang guy who wants to do like a universal income or something of X amount of dollars every month that just goes to everybody. That kind of reminds me of the prebate in FairTax, only it makes a little less sense than FairTax, I think.
yeah, I've heard a little bit about that. I mean, that's essentially the UBI, which we probably need to do an episode just about the concept of a UBI, because there's a lot to it. It does actually kind of sound real similar, although I'm pretty sure the FairTax prebate is rather small by comparison. I think the UBI was like some thousand and something dollars a month per person, and the FairTax.
Isn't a UBI when it like burns when you pee? Oh no, that's UTI. Sorry.
Yeah, whole different thing. Yeah, I think the FairTax rate is quite a bit less, maybe a tenth of the amount, but it's supposed to account for the amount that you would pay. Uh, yeah, like you said, for poverty level, somebody paying that tax is supposed to compensate them for it. Um, it's an interesting idea. What?
So you kind of put it on a scale, like, okay, I'd have to spend a lot more on things that I buy, but I'd have about that much more on my paycheck, so I guess it's kind of a wash in some cases. But is it really though? Because it sounds like there's going to be taxation on things that there aren't currently, like visiting the doctor,
Yeah.
which is certainly not cheap. And then you add 23% onto that, and like, whew,
Well, that is a service. I guess if you have insurance, theoretically it would be covered, so you wouldn't have to necessarily pay out of pocket for that.
would insurance cover sales tax though?
Well, maybe. I actually I don't know. I don't know how insurance works in that regard. Um, I would guess because, well, yeah, we'll have to look into that. But yeah, that's an interesting point, and because I think the fair tax does actually place a sales tax on all or most services, whatever they may be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, now
Yeah, I
the
forget
question,
what the exemptions were. There was a few things that you don't get taxed for. I don't remember exactly what they were, like
hmm,
maybe repairs or something like that.
well, it seems like medical expenses should be one of those, but
It should
well,
be, yeah.
Yeah,
But
and that could be an adjustment because obviously the fair tax hasn't been implemented and it's still kind of a conceptual thing at this point. So
yeah,
I'm sure some changes could be made. Um, yeah, because medical expenses are definitely rather costly.
yeah. Well, and then there's the issue of like groceries. Like, if you ever looked at your receipt when you go grocery shopping, there's actually not that many foods that are taxed as it
Yeah.
is. Um, Now, under, if you were operating under the fair tax, all of a sudden you would see a pretty hefty increase in your grocery bill, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and I guess it would be a matter of weighing the current federal income tax rate, how much you're paying against how much you'd be paying for groceries minus the prebate. If it's a wash, I guess that's fine. If it's simpler, I guess that at least is an improvement.
Hmm.
As long as we're not being charged more, I guess.
Yeah, uh, that's the only thing I would worry about is being charged more in the end. Maybe not directly from the federal government, but what exactly is there to stop states from hanging on to their particular sales tax or their income tax or both? And then adding that on top of the 23%, you could be looking at quite a bit of money out of your pocket. And then,
Well, yeah, and I don't think the states would. They probably wouldn't change their tax structures. If they have an income tax, a state level income tax, they probably keep it, which would get really confusing. Um, and yeah, and they're probably not going to change their sales tax, so it may end up costing a certain amount of money. But as I think you've probably discovered researching this, there's a lot of debate among economists as far as what the actual impact is going to be. Um,
yeah, because I've read some figures that the prebate alone would be somewhere in the realm of I want to say 400 billion a year, is what they're projecting. That's
ouch.
quite that's quite a bit of money going out just for the prebate. Never mind all the other stuff that it's supposed to float, like Social Security and Medicare and infrastructure and various other things that our current income taxes go for.
Yeah, I mean, we could go into the uh, concept that the state desperately needs to cut back on spending. Um, I think
Yeah,
that's part of it,
there's
but
plenty that they could trim without like getting into the important stuff, but
yeah,
that's a whole
yeah,
other.
yeah. But the thing is, I don't know. Maybe being able to capture a source of funding from these other realms like the black market and other untaxable uh, economies, essentially.
Well, that's
I
a good point because we don't really know how much money is moving underground
Yeah,
or
yeah,
or offshore. Like a lot of that is lacking transparency and
yeah. There's estimates, and it's kind of a lot of money.
uh-huh.
And so they're not paying any income tax. They're paying state sales tax. So for instance, somebody is a drug dealer, right? And they're rolling in money. They got millions of dollars. They're buying boats and cars and all kinds of houses and stuff and all kinds of cool stuff. They're not paying any federal income tax. So all that money is just circulating around locally and there's nothing going to the federal government. But if there was a federal sales tax, then yeah, all these things they're buying would contribute to that. And it might be actually kind of a lot of money.
Hmm. Yeah, and then there's the other cool thing is that it really benefits people who like to live thrifty. You know, like if you buy something used, they consider that that item has already paid its due in
Hmm.
regards to taxes. So you don't pay tax on something used, including a house.
Yeah.
And that's
Well,
pretty
and that
cool.
absolutely, and if you're concerned about helping low income people, that's a great way because they're not going to be buying the newest car or the newest stuff. I mean, a lot of people that don't have a lot of money, I've been there,
Yeah.
buy used things, and if you could save a few bucks, you're going to go that route, and yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I just it's really hard to wrap your head around without like having a country to point to that's like doing exactly that. You know, like there's a lot of people that point to flat tax and compare it to fair tax, and that's not really the same thing, is it?
Not really. No, it's a little bit different. And yeah, you're right. No one's really tried it before. Not at least the way it's presented.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean we shouldn't try it. Hell, anything's better than this completely ridiculous, convoluted system that we have now. Um,
Yeah. I
why
mean,
not give it a shot? And
yeah.
that's kind of what I'm thinking. You
Well,
know,
the only thing it would be like the difficulty of implementing something like that. There's a lot of like repercussions that come with it. Like, as much as I dislike the IRS, dissolving the IRS over the course of 3 years, as they would plan to do, would result in a lot of lost jobs. All of your, accountants and stuff like that would be losing, not necessarily losing their jobs because there's other functions that they do, but they would be losing a great deal of their business. And many of them would probably go under. But
maybe. Well, they still have to deal with the state tax. And if you go to a place like Oregon that doesn't have a sales tax but has an income tax, those accountants would be in demand in those kinds of areas, because now they have something completely new to deal with, something novel they haven't had to deal with before. I think it would just shift around. And I don't know that government jobs are something that are guaranteed that we should worry about protecting. I mean,
it's not just government jobs though. Like accountants and stuff like that are all private sector.
sure, but they serve other needs that aren't going to change if the fair tax is implemented. Accountants are absolutely needed all the time, so I'm not going to. I don't I don't see that those jobs are really diminishing. In fact, they might increase because there's states that don't have state sales tax that suddenly would have a demand for people to figure that stuff out.
Yeah.
So it would probably just shift from one place to another. It'd probably be a net zero in the
Yeah.
end.
No, I've heard uh, opponents to this fair tax idea say that it would be um, hard to regulate, hard to enforce. Why do you think that is? I can't really
Well,
figure that one out.
yeah, that's kind of unusual because the thing is, most states, I don't have it right in front of me. I'm not sure how many states have state sales tax, but most do. So it would just be a matter of using the same system that we already have. I can speak to Washington State where we are. We have a state sales tax, so you just add another number to it, like you do for a county or a city, and nothing changes.
Yeah, and I don't know, like we owned a business and I did the books and I paid the taxes and it seemed, it was a headache, but it seemed pretty straightforward and maybe I just don't think like a criminal, but I couldn't see any way to like cheat it, like without, your books looking funny.
Well, yeah, exactly. And you could obviously, I'm sure there's ways to circumvent such things, but not on any kind of scale that would have an impact. If you're a legit business like Walmart or something, you're not going to not collect sales tax. That'd be suicide.
Yeah.
So they're gonna do it anyway. Because I have heard that too. People saying like, "Oh, there's going to be a bunch of people circumventing the system and the black markets and stuff." And I just I don't see where that's going to happen
Yeah, I
on
mean,
a scale that matters.
yeah, I mean, a black market can still exist, of course.
Sure.
This isn't going to like remove that demand for underground economy, but what it does do is like capitalize on the fact that everyone participating in the underground economy has to go buy food and see the doctor and buy a car and buy a house and all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and and the more lucrative the business is, say you're some kind of cocaine dealer or something like that, rolling in hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars and buying boats and all kinds of stuff, you're going to pay it quite a lot of sales tax there.
Unless you're a
And
thrifty criminal and you just buy used.
yeah, exactly.
Because you know how to skirt the system.
Well, and that might happen, but the thing is, people still buy new stuff all the time. So I don't see that it's really going to change that much. What's nice about it is it eliminates a bunch of expensive government systems, and it makes things simple for everybody. You don't have to file anything, no paperwork, no nothing, unless you're a business owner. You just pay you pay what's due, and you're done. It's kind of simple.
Now, there is one thing that I've always been skeptical of. And like when I first heard of the fair tax, I was like really leery about it. And then I read about it and I got on board with it. And then I talked to some people who knew a little more about economics than I do. And I fell back on the skeptical side, mainly because of this one thing. Uh, I don't know that it's truly something you could call fair because because
Well,
proportionally speaking, the rich are still getting a way better deal than the lower income people. Even with that poverty level prebate, what you end up with is like people who make millions of dollars aren't spending millions of dollars. So all
some
that income isn't really pouring back into the system. It's, you only spend so much money.
some might be. It depends on who you are. If you're buying a bunch of multi-million dollar yachts and super expensive new houses and stuff like that, yeah, you're going to be contributing back into the system. I mean, that I guess from my perspective, it doesn't matter what happens elsewhere as long as the people who are the most disadvantaged are okay. I don't care how well off the wealthy are as long as the people, the poorest people are taken care of and not screwed over by the
Yeah.
system.
Yeah,
And that's where
I will say that for that argument, I don't see that the poor people are necessarily screwed, even if they're proportionally paying more, as like a ratio of their income to what they pay in sales tax.
yeah, yeah,
Like that doesn't really matter as long as they're not like made to be destitute from it, which of course remains to be seen in practice. But like there are plenty of economists out there who do think this is a good idea.
sure,
So, you know,
yeah, and I had been thinking about that particular aspect, the low income, um, the poor, basically, like how you could compensate for some of the shortcomings of the system, and maybe it should be a little bit flexible, where I guess like when you file your taxes with the federal government, sometimes you can submit receipts and claim state sales tax. What if with the fair tax system, people below a certain threshold, whatever is considered the poverty level, or maybe a little above that, or maybe it'll be a sliding scale or something like that. What if they could submit receipts and get compensation for let's say you're somebody that doesn't have a lot of money, but you're spending a lot of money on things and you're kind of getting screwed over by the high tax rate. If you could submit receipts and get an increased prebate, that might solve that particular problem with it.
Yeah, I mean, something like that might even solve the problem of like destroying all the jobs. Like, there would still kind of have to be something in place for that process to take place.
Sure.
Like there also could be like, maybe a nominal income tax for like a certain threshold and above, where like it's not even going to impact their livelihood.
Well, and that could be implemented maybe if say we institute the fair tax and it doesn't bring in what was expected, then maybe we could go back to the early 1913 tax rate, where only the very, very, very highest income earners pay 1 or 2% or something like that.
Actually, back in the day, we had a around 80 to 90% tax on the wealthiest people.
Well, that was like in the 50s or something. But it's interesting too. If you look at tax revenue, federal tax revenue as a percentage of GDP, it's never gone above like 15 to 20%, no matter what the rate is. Kind of interesting. But just a strange thing that I happen to know. Yeah, what I like about the fair tax is that it's a really simple system, and there's no deductions or loopholes or anything. Nobody can take advantage of it because, well, I guess you could buy used. That's your only option. But basically everybody has to buy things, no matter whether you have $0. Well, you'd have to have at least $1, I guess. Or if you're like a billionaire, you still have to buy things. So I think it's a really good system, or it's at least worth trying or entertaining the idea of trying it.
Now, one thing that comes to mind just now is, this built-in premise that it's only on new items, which I totally get and I'm totally on board with, because I hate the idea of double taxation. Having owned a business, I realized that we got like triple taxed on our income.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a load of BS. But when you understand how that system works, do you think that more people would start buying used and effectively like reusing and recycling items more and more and decreasing the income of tax?
Well, probably, but actually, I think that's a good thing. That's an environmentally conscious sort of thing to do. It actually would be great if we did that. And
Absolutely,
yeah,
for the environment, yeah. But
yeah.
as far as like for the country operating at a normal level, do you think it would be a good idea?
Well, maybe. I mean, I think the federal government does have to tighten its belt a lot, and maybe this would be the incentive to do that. And I still think that, based on what I've seen, it'll probably be pretty much a wash as far as the federal income goes. I don't think it's going to be like dramatically lower. But I'll say, if it encourages people to reuse things and not discard things, like I'm all for that. That's great.
Yeah. No, that's actually like, in a roundabout way, the fair tax could actually help the environment quite a bit.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe except for the case of cars, which are becoming increasingly better for the environment as they become newer. So like buying a Chevette from like 1979 or something just to save on the tax might not be better for the environment, but
No, but you
as
don't
far
have.
as reducing waste that goes into landfills and stuff, yeah.
Sure. And you only have to go back a couple of years, or well, just drive it off the lot for it to be used. Um,
That's true.
so I mean, there's plenty of hybrids and electric cars that are used now on the market. So it'll even out in the end, I think. Um, do, do you have any other concerns about it, or maybe pros or cons?
Um, I think that was pretty much the main points that have concerned me. Um, it would be really interesting to hear from people with a really good understanding of the economy, or maybe people that have heard of the fair tax, especially like what are your thoughts? You know, like, do you think this is a good idea or a bad idea? Do you think there's like good parts of it and maybe it just needs some tweaking? Like, it would be a really interesting conversation to continue, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a very fascinating idea. And I'm all for simplification. So anything like that automatically raises my interest. I Yeah, I'd love to hear from people who economists would be fine, but it just in general, I think people's ideas on what they think about this, and of course, you'd have to look into what the fair tax is first, not from what we talked about, because we kind of just glossed over it. So
Yeah,
we
there's a lot of details we passed over, but
yeah,
it's definitely like, what's the name of that book? Is it just the fair tax, or was
it's the
there?
fair tax book. Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's pretty cheap. I encourage everybody to get it and read it, because it's really interesting.
yeah, it was like 160 pages or something. It was really digestible.
Yeah, very light read, really fascinating. So yeah, it would
There
be
is one
interesting.
thing actually that, now that I remember, there is one thing that maybe our conspiracy theorist clientele of the show might want to look into is, um, I would be interested to see the proportion of people who are like in politics behind the fair tax, like pushing it. I want to know like what their income level is. Not that there's like poor politicians by any means,
Yeah.
but but I kind of wonder if like the richer of the rich politicians are the ones backing this, and then that might give you some indication that maybe it does benefit the rich.
Well, it
Maybe.
could, but the thing is, if it benefits everybody, then I guess it's probably fine. Just the fact that a certain income level sector of the population would be supporting it doesn't necessarily make it bad.
No.
But it's worth looking into, as always. Yeah, you should always be
Yeah, I mean,
skeptical.
one of the favored taglines of conspiracy theorists is "follow the money."
Yeah. That's very true. You should.
Follow the money. Follow the fair tax money.
Yeah, and not that. Yeah, well, we could. This is a. I could see a rabbit hole ahead of us, and so let's not go down it. Because I have some ideas on that, but maybe we'll probably do a follow up video. Um, Maybe take people's input on it and comment on it, and maybe we'll have some new ideas to add.
Yeah. I would encourage everyone to subscribe to our channel, like this, share it with your friends, absolutely comment, give us your ideas and thoughts. We'd love to hear them.
Yeah, and critiques always welcome. Look up the fair tax and tell us what you think in the comments, and we'll respond to it.
Yeah, we're not economists. We're just two dudes who like talking about stuff. So feel free to
So,
tell us that we're complete idiots, or shower us with praise, whatever.
yeah, and thanks for deep sink diving with us. Have a great day.
Enjoy the music on the way out.